So I have Chloe Duckworth with me on Here's What We Know. And Chloe, can I tell how I'm meeting you for the first time?
Yeah.
But I was at a benefit for the Cancer Society, and the person who sat right next to me was a young man named Cheyenne, and he told me how he got his name because his father was a big fan of Westerns. And he goes, "So my name is Cheyenne." And I'm like, "That's cool." And we talked about his research into cancer. And I told him what I do. And he goes, "You need to talk to my girlfriend because she's working on something that's fascinating." And he told me about it. And I went, "Yes, yes, I do." Can you give a thumbnail thing of the project you're working on?
Sure. So my startup is an emotion AI company. So we're creating essentially emotional analytics across the internet. We initially launched an Apple Watch app for autistic, ADHD, and other neurodivergent people to help better read the room and get essentially a vibration on your wrist associated with the vibe of the room, like a vibe check. And so it's analyzing tone as people are speaking and helping you better connect across screens in a virtual environment and across different vocal patterns and demographics that affect emotional perception.
So this is something that works in real time.
Yes.
That you would wear it again it's an app on your Apple Watch if you wanted something like that, or the wrist thing, and you would be able to talk to someone. And again, in an autistic situation, there are so many different levels of brain development, and I hate to say, missing pieces, right? I mean, just for lack of thing, that if you're lucky enough to be able to read emotions, where the majority of us are built that way, and when we can, and it's just an innate feeling. When you're talking to someone, they're happy, they're sad, they're something like that. There are situations where there are people who don't have that capability to recognize.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's interesting because a lot of sort of neurotypical people that don't have a diagnosis think that we're really good at perceiving emotions. But through our research, we've been able to demonstrate like significant emotional perception gaps across all people. What the core problem is the way that we naturally perceive emotions is by comparing it to our own in-group. So if you're speaking to a group of people that aren't autistic, and you are within that neurotype and similar accent, age, gender, it's much easier for you to perceive those emotions. But every time there's a mismatch of accents, of cultural backgrounds, or in this case, neurotypes, it makes it a lot harder to perceive emotions. So it's actually a bidirectional challenge. It's not just autistic people that struggle with emotional perception. It's also that neurotypical people struggle to interpret autistic emotional sentiment.
That's a good point that I didn't consider.
Yeah.
That maybe I need that situation or some kind of device with that, not just to plug yours because it's your company, but it's a great idea. But the idea that it would help me understand if this person is happy or sad or nervous or angry, and they don't have the ability to give me the social cues, that I could pick up on that.
Yeah, it's just different. Like the way that we all express emotions is different. So even across different cultures, Western cultures, for example, have a tendency to stigmatize upspeak. So when you're posing a sentence and you raise your intonation at the end of the sentence, it's seen as either a question or a lack of confidence in what you're saying. But in Eastern cultures, that's a sign of humility. And so it causes like a cultural mismatch where sometimes women are more likely to do upspeak, for example, in a Western context. And men can misinterpret women as being unconfident in what they're saying just because of that change in intonation that's inherent to the way that we communicate.
That's fascinating when you think about, especially in the differences in languages and you say in culture.
Yeah.
I know the Asian culture. I read this study literally earlier this week that the students tend not to ask questions in class because in that culture it's considered rude at the moment. But by the same token, if you look at office hours, when a professor or a teacher offers office hours, it's usually filled with Asian students because that's when they feel you don't ask questions in front of class. You ask questions individually.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of their culture, where in the West, that's what you would do. You'd sit back and go, I don't get anything that you just said.
Yeah.
Right. And it would not be viewed as rude.
Yeah.
It would not be viewed as a sign of stupidity. In fact, I think, I don't know if it is, but it should be viewed as a sign of intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you're able to go, hey, I know you've explained to me that quantum theory thing. And I get some of it, but I'm not sure I catch on to the whole jibe of what you're trying to float to me right now. And that's the thing. It's fascinating. Before we dive deeper into that, I do want to know the story of where did this journey start for you? Yeah. Why did this become important to you? Was it just a great idea? Is it something that you know somebody who struggles with? I mean, where's the story from?
Yeah. It was a fun story. So started the company coming out of a hackathon. I went to college at USC. My background is in computational neuroscience. And I met my co-founder my freshman year, living right across from me in the dorm. And we were working on various research projects together and decided to enter this hackathon to create a haptic feedback mechanism. It was through a Neosensory, which came out of Stanford. Neosensory is a neurotech company that helps deaf and hard of hearing people better interpret sounds as vibrations. So they've essentially created this wristband that conveys the beat of sound as haptic feedback to help deaf people perceive car alarms versus, other sounds that they encounter in their daily life as a vibration on the wrist. And so this hackathon was inspiring developers to create new sensory substitution and augmentation technologies where you can take one modality that naturally perceive emotions and substitute that into haptic feedback. Or you can take information that we don't naturally perceive as like a one-to-one sensory stream and add that into the haptic feedback. So a previous example was they used this for binary stock market information. They were feeding people as haptic feedback as an early demo that they showed. So we came up with this idea of expressing emotion as a real-time tangible signal so that you can literally walk into a room and feel a vibe check of that room as you're speaking to people via haptics. And the reason why we cared about this problem, myself and my co-founder Shannon both had personal connections to neurodiversity growing up, and we're really passionate about improving accessibility in communication. It was also at the midst, or really the start of COVID, when we initially launched this project. And we were seeing how in a digital environment, emotional perception for everyone was just so much more difficult. We moved to Zoom. Our freshman year in college was cut short. So we basically went to college for 6 months, came home, and just started working on side projects because it was a very different education environment. And so we wanted to also improve emotional connection across screens as people are speaking in platforms like Zoom. And so that was the initial reasoning for the technology. Ended up building a prototype through Neosensory in this hackathon, later launching an Apple Watch app. And now we're also selling enterprise licenses to integrate this into your workspace to help better connect across customers, internal teams, sales teams, etc.
So it seems like, especially in the age of what we're doing here, video conferencing.
Yeah.
Right. Because this has become, 10 years ago, this was honestly science fiction for the society to act the way it is now, where it makes it a lot easier. It makes it easier for you and I to connect.
Yeah.
I just literally confirmed, I've got a podcast coming up with a guy in the Netherlands. Right.
Amazing.
But it gives you that option.
Yeah.
It one-on-one, I don't think, for me personally, I have a problem gauging your emotions. Mm-hmm. But if there were 12 of us here,
it's hard.
That would be an interesting, and this is through artificial intelligence technology, is it not?
Yes, through deep learning.
Fascinating. So you would be able to like understand the group as far as, like I said, if there were 12 of us on this screen right now, and I had the device on right now, it would give me an idea of what it's happening as far as the group things.
Yeah. So it's not just the watch. We have like web-based solutions, APIs, and we're building plugins for most video conferencing platforms. Essentially, it will analyze each person's audio stream in a completely opt-in basis. So you can opt in or opt out at any point in the call. And it's helping people better gauge how each person is feeling within this group on a real-time level, but then also a larger conversational understanding of the highs and lows points of that conversation and in general, how successful that conversation was. This is also helpful when you're speaking to a customer, for example. I think a lot of people can perceive basic emotions. So you can understand generally, am I content versus elated versus upset? But very nuanced variations in how a particular emotion like happiness or interest, for example, is increasing in response to particular things that you're saying is oftentimes hard. And especially in a video conferencing platform where the bit rate of video processing is so low, we're skipping so many frames. We're not getting true micro expressions when we're watching people's faces. And so there's a lot of missing information that makes it a lot harder for our brains to perceive emotions in a video conferencing format than in real life. And so with that, we're able to track how interest is changing, or sentiment in general is changing in response to specific points in that call, so that you understand what the disconnects might be.
Is there, and I'm sure you've thought of every possible computation of how this can be used. How about in a court of law? How about in that scenario where, you have a defendant or a witness? Do you see a path for that? I mean, if you guys, again, you've studied it much harder than I have. I'm learning about it now, which is, I'm fascinated by. And if you have your AI up, I'm hoping it's showing that.
It's on the watch. Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I think the way that we think about the technology that we're building is that it's really powerful in improving human communication and connection across people. And that's really what we care about as a company, is like, how can we use this technology in the most pro-communication, pro-humanity use cases? I think we've learned a lot of the past several decades of lie detector tests. There's a lot of bias in lie detector tests and a lot of like sort of dubious predictions that can be derived from the data that you get from a lie detector test. And that's because there's a lot of context that's missing when you're just looking at the biomarkers. And the science behind lie detector tests is also very dubious and questionable now. And so when we look at something like a court of law, the use case of emotion detection is not actually to improve the person speaking's communication. And so in that case, it wouldn't necessarily be in their best interest for emotion detection to occur in that environment. Certainly other companies might move into that space, but in terms of the goal of what we're doing, it's to be able to improve communication across people. And so in that use case, that wouldn't be really meeting our mission and vision for how we can improve digital communication by integrating it into a court of law.
It's fascinating because technology division, here's my favorite saying of all time. This is my life motto. You ready? Nothing ever turns out the way you think it will.
Yeah.
Just doesn't. Every drug that you can see advertised today started off as something else. They thought, okay, we'll treat this, and then all of a sudden it'll become, and then you find out the side effect. Oh, well, here you go. Here's the side effect. Well, you want that, right? And and everything you can think of, every political decision and all that stuff. So I remember when I was looking your stuff up, and I was looking at Valence. Is that how you say it? Valence Vibrations?
Yeah. Valence is the company.
Valence. you have a 50-50 shot, depending on where you're from. That's how, it's either going to be, So, but when I was looking up your stuff, I was thinking, well, now who takes that and takes it in completely different directions, right? Because one of the first things I thought was, well, that would be interesting to take this device to a political debate, when you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people on stage. And especially if you can read the room and then read the individuals on the room.
Huh.
It'd be something that would, and you're going to find coaches, because that's what we do now.
Yeah.
You find a coach who'll coach you up on any topic, and there's going to be somebody going, I can coach you on how your emotional thing. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying that's, in a pejorative sense, that maybe it is. You have to be completely self-aware of your own emotions.
Yeah.
And that we're probably better at hiding our own emotions from ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? That we tend to try to push things down, or we try to assuage anger, or we give in to anger. As we record this, the world around, the news in the world is horrible with terrorist attacks and stuff like that. And I don't know how you would be a functioning human and not have an emotional response to everything you've seen. And some of and I found this, I was in the car with my kids this morning, and all of a sudden I was through a sports show, and they start going down this topic.
Yeah.
And my children are 11 and 13. So I changed the channel and I tried to push those emotions aside. So therefore I was hiding the emotions from myself. And sometimes that's the only way you can function, right? I mean, we hear the term social anxiety, and I think it's overused, because I think we all have social anxiety unless you're a true psychopath. So we all have that, and we all have to navigate. Sometimes you have to push that fear down. That you may be nervous about coming on and talking to a guy you never met before about your device, but you go, well, but this is important. I want to share this information. I want people to understand it. So you had to combat your own social anxiety. Therefore, you pushed it down. It'd be interesting to find out what we learn about ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big use case with users right now, where they care most about being able to track their own emotions throughout the day and check in with themselves. And you're right, people get very good at hiding our emotions from ourselves. So because it feels like if I don't acknowledge that I'm feeling a certain way about a situation, then I don't need to sort of deal with the repercussions of that emotion. And I think oftentimes we're trying to find a level of equanimity that requires us to understand our reactions to things in order to get back to our baseline. And I think that, to your point, we're living in a time where we have access to unprecedented amount of information about the world, good and bad. But the bad side of that is that we can literally feel empathy for people across the world in war zones, in real time, streaming what's happening. And that was something that humans didn't have to encounter before. We understood war. We read about it in the newspapers when that was the thing to do, but it wasn't something that we felt viscerally in the way that we do now. And I think that our nervous systems are constantly being overloaded with so much stimuli, and also the ability to receive so much information, that being able to check in with your own emotions and find those moments of stillness and calm and equanimity is really difficult, but really necessary in the times that we're in.
I would imagine the first two subjects for your application and your device were you and your partner, you and the guy you know. So what have you learned about you? What's been something that you figured out about you?
Yeah. I think part of starting this company and like going through deep dives for myself and my partner, for, my co-founder. We really wanted to dive into the nitty-gritty of emotional conversations, how they start, how they progress. And, oftentimes I think in our head, we have a tendency to try to keep score in disputes. And I think that seeing like the tangible emotional relationship that you have in a fight and seeing how one person's emotions so directly impact another's was really fascinating for me and helped me, I think, have a lot more compassion as a person. As I mentioned before, everyone perceives emotions by comparing it to your own in-group. But if you've never been told that you have a diagnosis of something that is commonly correlated with an emotional perception deficit or challenge, then oftentimes we have very little awareness of the moments when we're getting it wrong. So we know in general that something is wrong, but we don't necessarily always know if our partner is mad at us or if they are upset from something that happened, hours ago, unrelated to you, but then those emotions spilled over into the conversation you're having right now. And so being able to be really in tune with your own emotions and those of the people around you, their baseline, their high and low points, just makes it much easier to communicate and strengthens emotional relationships.
I am so excited to be working with the Nugent Family Counseling Center, founded by Dr. Jeff Nugent. They have 3 office locations in San Jose, Santa Clara, and Reno, Nevada. What they do is support a diverse community of children, adolescents, adults, and families who are affected by conditions such as addiction, depression, anxiety, trauma, stress, and grief. They strive to provide clients with the tools needed to understand and acknowledge the effects that their emotions and behaviors have on themselves and their personal relationships. As Dr. Nugent told me, we try to help our clients fix what's wrong. They don't want you coming forever. They want to help you get past this problem. And they also remind families what they love about each other and utilize a combination of individual, family, and couples therapy. They can help you no matter what you're facing. You do not have to go through this alone. Check out NugentTherapy.com. NugentTherapy.com. You can do this, and they can help. Sterling Oak Cabinetry has one goal: to build the cabinets of your dreams. They literally specialize in custom cabinetry. No cookie cutter, everything looks the same stuff that you find at the big box stores. Your kitchen is the centerpiece of your home, and your home is your biggest investment. They can work with you or your designer to build just what you want with the materials and finish that you want. And because they're a brand new company, they'll be getting busier and busier. But if you order right now, they'll get your order to you in 6 to 8 weeks. In the world of cabinetry, that's blindingly fast. Contact Rob Scovman at RSKOVMAND@yahoo.com or go to SterlingOakCabinetry.com and get your dreams made reality tomorrow.
Where do you see, because technology is always progressing and your technology is always progressing, and you're always looking to upgrade, right? You're always looking to go to the 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0. We're at the risk of, I'm not asking you to divulge company secrets, all right? But where are your goals for this technology?
Yeah. I love answering that question. I mean, our moonshot is building the emotional subtitle of the internet. I think we were really excited throughout COVID to see like the rapid deployment of technology in the accessibility and communication space. We saw companies like Otter really thrive, extending subtitles and alt text all across the internet. So now every time you're on social media, you see alt text on images. All across video conferencing, you can turn on subtitles. On Netflix, you can turn on closed captioning if you're watching a show in a different language, for example. And we want to add emotional context back into that. We think that the state of digital communication is not sustainable. We're in an environment where more and more high stakes conversations are occurring in digital settings. And because of these inherent gaps in the information that our brains can process from a video conferencing platform, We need to be able to fill that deficit. And especially in the age of generative AI, where a lot of people are really excited about the new capabilities of AI, but also a lot of people, particularly those that don't work in technology, are really afraid about the implications of AI and what that will mean for automation, for job security and communication. And I think that what's important in the next wave of AI technologies is to consider what is left that's distinctly human and how can we highlight that in a digital environment. And answering that question for myself, I think that being able to empathize and connect across people is something that is distinctly human that will not be able to be automated away. The human will always be in that loop in emotional connection. And so using AI to actually improve our ability to do that really well while keeping humans in the loop is a pro-human application of the technology. And I think we see the technology serving as an emotional passport to help people gain access to the emotional patterns of types of people they've never encountered before, or situations they've never encountered before, to be able to improve that connection.
I hope it leads to more empathy, because I think out of all the stuff, people always try to say, wherever time you live in, people try to equate it. Well, it's never been this bad.
Yeah.
And the truth of it is, it has. History is littered with horrific times, and they're no, what we're going through now is not the worst times. And this is, it's just not. Study your history. I'm literally reading a book now that's going to be talking to the author about 1968. The fact that we survived 1968 when things were truly much worse than anything that we're going through now. But I do think that one of the things with social media, it's a double-edged sword. I think there is pockets of empathy, but I think there's a lot more pockets of, I say this, opinion entitlement. Mm-hmm. That we can't disagree. You must agree with me and admit you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's
interesting. It's in someone's living room, mm-hmm. like having an opinion on their life. When we talk about like parasocial relationships a lot, like people that think that they have a real relationship with a celebrity. So they not only can like Taylor Swift's music or enjoy Justin Bieber as a performer, but feel entitled to know so much personal information about them and then comment on that personal information as sort of like moral police, right or wrong. It's sort of the chessboard of celebrity interactions. And it's similar with just random influencers that exist on the internet. I think people feel so entitled to have an opinion on other people's lives because we now have such unprecedented access to the mundanity of other people's lives and being able to like criticize very specific types of interactions that we just didn't know about before because it wasn't necessarily written about in the newspaper in the same extensive way that we can watch a vlog of 24 hours of someone's life on TikTok.
I think it even goes past that. You see the people, and again, I'll use Taylor Swift, and because anybody knows my background, I've had many dealings with Taylor Swift. We had her in a club when she was 14 twice. Wow. I've had her in our radio station when we celebrated our 25th anniversary on the air. She sent us flowers. I mean, so I love who she is and the person she is.
Yeah.
But my point is when you start going to the Swifties, right? The rabid fans.
Yeah.
And it's not that they know Taylor. It's the fact that they feel they have to defend her against any criticism or comments that they do not deem worthy.
Yeah.
That's the scary part for me. You can criticize Taylor Swift all you want. If Ed comes to me and goes, I don't like her music. And God forbid he tweeted that or said it on Facebook, and to have the barrage of fans that come that way.
Yeah.
Right? That's the empathy I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I don't care if you like the music I like. I don't care if you like me, right? There's plenty of people who don't like the stuff I do. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to worry about the people who do like me. Right. But there's that contingent of society. And I know we're kind of getting off topic for it, but it's just it's kind of interesting. I love conversations. Is that when, it's the people who come in and go, no. Not only are you wrong, you must admit that she's the greatest thing that's ever happened. And the fact that you dared criticize her, you should be chastised. That's the empathy I talk about. Right.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about with your technology, I'm hoping it's the people, I'm hoping that it's, I'm taking my life in my own hands, just using the word Swifty. And I'm just using that as an example. Pick anybody you want. Crocheting, Kim Kardashian. It doesn't matter. I'm just using Taylor Swift because she's literally the biggest star in the world right now. You're hoping that those people who are fanatic about it would hopefully use this technology to go, whoa, why am I feeling this? Why am I angry that Ed doesn't like her music? And because I'd be willing to bet you don't like most of Ed's music.
Yeah.
I would hope that it turns into such a device of self-reflection. I think and maybe that's your goal. It seems like that is the penultimate usage.
Yeah. It's like, how can I check in with myself, my emotional reactions to things? How can I understand other people's emotional reactions to things? And in particular, their emotional reactions to me. Maybe that means that they are being verbally abusive to me and I need to exit that conversation. Maybe that means that I'm not being as empathetic as I should and I'm actually causing a negative emotional reaction to someone else that I don't want to and I don't intend and probably wouldn't do if I was in an in-person encounter. But because I'm hiding behind a screen, I don't think of that person behind the other side as human in the same way that they are when they're standing right in front of me. And that's why online bullying and harassment can be particularly fierce because we're enabling ourselves to step outside of a real human encounter and like truly empathize with the person that we're speaking to.
Do you see one of the banes of my existence is predictive text? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's the old joke. If I meant to say duck, I would have said duck. Right? Could you see a scenario where this could be predictive emotions?
I think yes, in some senses. So the way that we are looking at like enterprise applications of the technology right now, it's how first can we improve emotional connection in a given conversation and improve empathy in that conversation? But also after the conversation, what can we learn about how that went that informs how the next conversation goes? So when you're talking to a customer and you notice that your first 10 customers that you spoke with this month are all raising like a particular objection to a particular feature, and they're saying lots of things during the conversation, but now you have AI telling you that like their most strong emotional negative reaction was to this particular feature, even though what they said wasn't necessarily different than what they were saying about other things. But there was a strong emotional reaction to that one feature. Being able to take that back to product teams or marketing, if that's the issue, and actually understand the crux of what you were missing before is an example of conversational intelligence. So how could we use this technology to inform how the next conversation goes and hopefully reduce miscommunications even more?
As someone who's running my own businesses, and going back to nothing ever turns out the way you think it will. There's a question for you when you develop this technology, because it sounds like, you guys have studied it, but you're also one of the salespeople, right? I mean, so you never expected that, did you? Because I never expected. I'm my salesperson too. Right. And this is, again, not about the technology. It's just about your experience. How about that? Did you ever see that coming? Did you ever think, well, this is what I'm going to have to do? And isn't it amazing how quickly you adapted? Because you're an intelligent young woman. And I know I'm assuming here, this is me taking it. It seems like that's part of your success brand, right? That you adapt. You adapt quickly.
Yeah. And yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I never saw myself in this sort of role, especially in enterprise sales. It's been an interesting shift for me, but one that I'm welcoming. I think what I didn't expect as a founder, as someone that had a science background, I was really excited to dive into like the deep technical, hairy challenges with Shannon, my co-founder. And that was what we were really excited about, in solving like the human need. But all of the other operational things, like there was just so many things that I didn't know how to do before starting the company. And I think it's been really fun to be able to upskill myself so rapidly and like handle each. Because I mean, scaling a company from 0 to 1 and then from 1 to growth, like there's so many different challenges that you just have not encountered before. You haven't scaled a company in that space before. And so it's been fun, challenging. I've been like so grateful for my co-founder and for the like wonderful advisors and team that we have that support us and help me understand where I need to go from here. So it's been a journey, but I welcome it.
It's fun. And I agree with everything you said. And the other side of it is it's sometimes overwhelming. And it's sometimes, I don't care who you are, there's going to be moments of despair, and that you have to go, this is temporary, right? And you go from there, and it'll take you where you're supposed to be, and the meetings never stop.
No. Definitely not.
It's amazing how many times I was literally, I was texting with a friend of mine, and they're in another industry, and they're like, "Oh, what's going on this weekend?" And I listed, what we're doing today, blah, 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 blah. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" And I'm like, it's Friday. What do you mean, what's going on? This is Friday.
Yeah.
You want to see Monday's schedule? It's
workday.
It's just there. It's there. Yeah. And that's the thing with this technology now. You do get to have meetings all over the place. Where I have friends of mine who would literally just travel. They would be gone 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time doing meetings, and now you do this.
I know. It's funny. I was talking to another founder that started their company like before the pandemic. So they had raised money pre-COVID and then again post-COVID. And the difference in fundraising in an online environment is so stark, because before you would pick the particular investors that you really wanted to meet with and you would fly out and meet with them. And there was a lot of in-person interaction, and fundraising was just a very different process. But now you're in an online environment where you can just stack, 10, 15 meetings in a day, depending on how short the meetings are, back to back to back. And that's how fundraising gets done. And you're not in person with the investors. Many of our investors I had never met in person before they wired their money. And some of them I still haven't met in person. So it's just such a different environment. And I think for me and my co-founder, being in school, being able to start the company as students, graduate early to go full time, but like before graduating, being able to watch recorded lectures on the weekends and then work all day on the company was something that couldn't have happened before COVID. So in that sense, it really accelerated our journey, because we wouldn't have been able to do that and also be full-time students when we were just getting started.
I've been blessed enough to know a number of founders. This will be your first. Is this your first?
My first company? Yes. I've started a nonprofit before, but it's different. Yeah.
And this will end up being what you do for your life.
Yeah.
There will always be a new idea. There will always be something that triggers you in a good way. Again, an overused word, that it'll trigger you into going, hey, has anybody ever thought of this? Or how can we apply that? I mean, I think of people with ALS, who are, and there's a number of diseases, much better than I, it's in your field, who are locked in their bodies. Mm-hmm. Right? And it would be wonderful if we found a way to tap into those emotions. Right? Yeah. And it just seems like, somebody with the brain your size, instead of my little pinhead, should be able to figure out a way to go there. Have you played with that?
So we aren't a medical device company,
Oh,
though.
I know you're not. I'm just saying
No. Yes.
the idea of it. So yeah,
Yes.
I don't want to add anything into it. This is just me
Yeah.
talking to you, Chloe,
Of course.
as a big brain person.
Yeah, I mean, prior to starting the company, I worked for BrainMind, which is like a neurotech nonprofit trying to incubate high impact brain technologies, connecting academics with serial tech entrepreneurs and investors, and got to work with a lot of founders of brain computer interface companies. And many of them are working on ALS, locked-in syndrome, using invasive and non-invasive techniques depending on the disease state that you're looking at, and helping better read from the brain and then also write to the brain in the case of like a movement disorder, for example, where you're trying to actually help people move again or be able to control a computer from their mind without actually moving any limbs. So I've looked at a lot of those technologies through that experience and through other academic research, and it's fascinating to me. I love the brain-computer interface space. I think there's so much innovation that's happening there that the public is going to gain more awareness of in the next 5 years. And I'm really excited to start to see human trials happen and just that space expand, because it was in its infancy for a long time where a very select few people knew about these technologies, and they were mainly happening in an academic environment. And not ever sort of going from bench to bedside. So to see that happen in real time and to have a front row seat is incredible to me.
See, I'm fascinated by science. Not that I'm smart enough to understand it, but I think one of the things that we're able to do with technology now is we're able to explain it better. We're able to show it better. Yeah. Right. And it's just like, to me, astrophysics. I have a better understanding of astrophysics now because they can tell me what we're looking at. They can explain to me the whole concept of it. And I get excited about so many things in science. And you just mentioned some of them. Can I ask you again? This is just on a personal level.
Yeah.
What are you excited about? What do you set back? Because, you know, you're in there. You're at Stanford. You're part of the whole, hey, we're doing this, we're all that. And you have your friends and people that you know and they stuff. And it may not be your field of expertise. I'm just asking you, what's some of the things you're excited about that you go, wow, I think that's so fascinating.
So many things. One random field that I don't study myself, but have friends fascinated and intricately involved in it is like quantum biology.
Quantum biology. Hold on now. Slow down. Slow down and let's unpack that real quick. Quantum biology. So this is on the molecular level. Yes.
So the understanding of, you know, quantum physics informing biological processes. So it's really interesting to look at things like photosynthesis or other like energetic cellular processes and how quantum physics informs those processes. I don't want to butcher the explanation of the entire field, but
well, again, it's like I'm going to know. But I just think the fact that you said the words quantum biology was enough to blow my mind.
Yeah, it's a really interesting space, and it's definitely emerging. Within neuroscience, I'm really fascinated by systems neuroscience and this idea of emergent properties. So when I was still in college, I worked for the Connectome project, and we were looking at how to map the connections in the brain. I worked mainly in rat mouse models, but then also some human models. And it was really interesting to look at like the different levels that we can examine architecture and function in a brain, and also a lot of the properties that are conserved across different animal models. So that's something that we haven't completed a human connectome yet where we can map all of the neurons in a brain. But once we do, I'm so excited for what that's going to lead to in terms of like a systems understanding of the brain.
See, I love that, especially when you talk to smart people and that they tell you something that's kind of fun. Because I remember my son, again, I have younger children and they're like, so he was going, Dad, what's quantum physics? And I'm like, It's very hard for me to explain. I said, but let me give you my understanding of it. What makes it fascinating is every law we have on the macro level doesn't exist on the quantum level. Matter of fact, it's almost the exact opposite. So when you say quantum biology, that's where my brain goes. Yeah. It's like everything that we think, oh, skin. And then when you get to quantum biology, it's like, no, it's rubber bands and cement. I mean, because everything we think is just different. Yeah. Right? And the fact that, because I get excited, as I said, I was at the American Cancer Society a bit of it. I get excited about what they're doing with cancer, that possibly being able to figure out the DNA of being able to eradicate cancer at the DNA level.
Yeah.
That was my head exploding, in case you're listening, right? It's absolutely fascinating. So I love that. Again, that's just me going down a different path that you weren't expecting, but that's what I like. It's Valence.
Yes.
Valence Vibrations, and it's an app you can get. It's so many different ways, as you said, and it's something we can all check out and try the demo and go from there.
Yes. Yeah, we love that. We have an Apple Watch app that's live for Apple Watch Series 4 and later, just because the operating system requirements. And then we have an API that we just launched for companies to integrate into their communication stack online. So really would love to hear any feedback from listeners.
Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
This has been fascinating, and thank you for thank you for indulging in my flights of fancy in the science world.
Of course. Thanks for having me.